So I hope you'll forgive me if I'm a little bit less articulate today as we sit at the intersection of Dublin, where there's a lot of Guinness, and also me being at the post-give-a-fuck era of my life, which can be a bad combination when you know you have to sit on stage in front of folks the next morning. My objective here is to give you all something totally different. In my career, we were just having a conversation backstage. I have found that creativity lies at the intersection. So what that means is that often you can draw something from one field and apply it to another to create a breakthrough. And we've seen this time and again through art, through music, through science. And we have a tendency to get so hyper-focused, our tunnel vision, when we exist in SaaS or AI, that all we're thinking about is metrics and software and the specific sales tactics that we're using and SDRs and BDRs and all that kind of stuff. And sometimes it's good to go and look into breakthroughs from other fields and bring them to your own. And the first trick I learned was from John Lennon. Now, before we get started here, how many, by show of hands, how many founders do we have in the audience? I just want to know who I'm talking to here. Okay, I fucking love you guys. Founders, I'm all about you. How many investors do we have in the audience? Okay, good. You can just close your ears because I may have some naughty things to say. Storytelling like Lennon. I once heard a quote from John Lennon where he said, and he was explaining to actually George Harrison how to write songs, and he said, when you come up with a good line and a good melody, don't write it down. Come back to it the next day, and if you can remember it, you're gonna know that you have a good line. And I thought to myself, holy cow, that is such an interesting insight. Why would John Lennon, the Beatles' genius songwriter, storyteller, not want to write the line down that he'd memorized, or sorry, that he had come up with this brilliant line? Why would you not want to be able to come back to it? It's because he recognized that in order to be a great storyteller, a master storyteller, which, by the way, every entrepreneur, if you're going to succeed at scale, you will have to become, every founder, it's because he realized that if he couldn't remember the line, then probably the teenagers listening to the radio wouldn't be able to remember it either. And he fundamentally understood that stories are part of our almost cognitive psyche. They are ingrained in our brains. That's why we see similar, it's Joseph Campbell's monomyth. And that's why we see the same stories being told over and over again in disparate societies that have never met each other. And yet we still, in our brains, because we're all so similar, come up with the same stories that then end up in our prefrontal cortex and our limbic system and get passed down over generations. And Lennon recognized this, and he knew how to exploit it. And so the question is, how can you exploit this almost bug in the human brain, which is trained to remember the good stuff? And here's what you can do. You can memorize your lines. When you come up with a story, if you memorize your lines, the sheer act of memorization is going to make the story get truncated, and it's going to make it better and better and better as you modify the exact words you say. I've spent so much time memorizing lines. I want to tell you, last week I was hanging out in Atlanta, and I was with some of our team there, and I was with a guy named David Cummings, who founded many companies in Atlanta. He founded SalesLoft. Maybe you've heard of SalesLoft. He's involved as a founder in Calendly. Maybe some of you use Calendly. And I gave a demonstration, and David asked me, Howard, what did you change this time? And I pulled out my phone, and I showed him that I had 12 voice recordings of me having rehearsed the exact words that I was going to say, one part of it, and tweaked it until I got it exactly as I want. And so the point here is, when you whittle something down to be able to remember it yourself, you're going to be able to remember it, just like a teenage girl or boy on the radio is going to be able to remember John Lennon's song. You want to exploit this in your own storytelling. Make sure when you tell a story that it's coming out naturally in a way that it's going to be ingrained in in the hardware of the person who's listening to it. Now, related to this is kind of a bonus side one with regard to storytelling and Lennon. I recommend founders always do live demos. How many of you have done a live demo before, like live on stage? I always did live demos. I did a live demo at TechCrunch 50 to launch Yext back in 2009 with voice recognition, before voice recognition really was any good. And the acoustics in the theater were freaking terrible. I mean, we were, everything that could have gone wrong will gone wrong. And here's the thing, the risk always outweighs the reward when you do a live demo. The reason for this is, it's a really simple thing. When you're doing a live demo, people are sitting around and they are waiting and watching for your demo to fail. You're waiting for it to fail, you're thinking it's gonna fail, and they're thinking it's gonna fail too. They can't unsee or unfeel the suspense of the demo, and they're with you with the anxiety of failure. In fact, something failing in a story is kind of like the best thing that could possibly happen. For example, if I stood up right now and fell and broke my arm, you guys would be like, "Oh," but that would be the one thing you remembered from this conference. That jerk on stage fell and broke his arm. Oh, too bad. Well, that's what people remember. And so when you do a live demo and something goes wrong, you can almost turn that into a lovable moment that makes sure that someone's going to do it. So you want to tell stories like Lennon. You want to remember your lines. You want to do live demos, whether it's on the stage of Abbey Roof Studios or it's in a controlled center with AV that will definitely break, and you can always blame the Wi-Fi. I am such a jerk. I know this is not going to come across well in Europe, but I hold Sunday night executive meetings. I've done this for 15 years. I'm watching some of my team chuckle in the audience. They know that come 8 p.m., 9 p.m. Sunday nights, that it's time for an executive call. Most people are done with the weekend. I like to get my team kind of amped up for the week. And I had no moral authority in doing this until I heard that Tim Cook did it. And now I say, well, if Tim Cook can do it and they're already worth, what are they worth? 2 trillion, 3 trillion, something like that. I'm not a finance person. Anyway, they're worth a lot of money, so that gives me the moral authority to kind of do that. And so now I say that it was his idea and I took it. That's the first cheat code that I have stolen from Tim Cook. I'm going to give you one more cheat code about meetings. About 5 years ago, I wrote a post that said, it's time to end one-on-one meetings, and I put it on LinkedIn. And it was maybe the best performing post I'd ever made, and I got freaking crushed for it. Everyone basically was like, you're a bad manager, which is true, and you don't know what you're talking about. Proper management is to set up one-on-one meetings with your staff and to hold a standing session recurring with every, you have 12 direct reports, 15 direct reports, hold a meeting with them once a week for the week, and that's how you manage people. How many of you do that? How many of you by show of hands, hold a direct one-on-one meeting with your staff each week? Okay, I'm gonna give you the best liberating cheat code in the world. You don't have to do that anymore. Cancel them all. Cancel one-on-one meetings, cancel recurring one-on-one meetings with your team. It does not make you a bad manager. I got crushed for doing this, for writing this 5 years ago, though I had used it very effectively over the years. And then Jensen Huang came out, and he's like, I don't do one-on-one meetings. One-on-one meetings are terrible. I do meetings with the whole team, with my whole team. And by the way, some people will say, VCs will say, you need to think about how you're gonna scale. You can only have 12 direct reports, 15. How are you gonna scale? Well, guess what? Don't listen to them. Have as many direct reports as possible. You can have 30 direct reports if you want. Jensen has 50. And so apparently once Jensen came out and said this, it became acceptable, and now Everyone talks about not having one-on-one meetings. Here's the thing. If you have 15 one-on-one meetings, it will take up 15 hours of your week. If you're gonna work 80 hours this week, that's a huge percentage of your week, which is lost. Secondly, people that you need to work with are queuing up information for the meeting. They're holding it back. If you wanna know something, I wanna know it now. Let's have the conversation. Call me, come find me, let's talk about it. Let's move on to the next thing. And then finally, they turn into therapy sessions. Like, I've had one-on-one meetings with folks where like they come in and nothing feels wrong, like everything's great, but by the end of the session, they're like laying back on the couch in my office with their head up and everything seems terrible. So don't go into the cobwebs. Therapy is fine, but I'm not a therapist. Let's go on, let's cancel your one-on-one meetings. I learned this from Jensen Huang, even though I did it before him. Teddy Roosevelt, President of the United States, used to hold 5-minute meetings. I read about this in Doris Kearns Goodwin's book, again, taking from a genius outside of the field of technology. He used to have people line up in his office and he had a timer. And he'd time meetings for 5 minutes and bring in the next person when the timer was up. And people would come in and they would pitch him on stuff like, we need funding for this war, or I need to be able to build national parks. And he would hear their case, and within 5 minutes, he'd make a yes or no decision and move on to the next person. Now, if you think about how big these decisions that were being made are, it's insane to think that the President of the United States is making snap decisions, if you will, based on a 5-minute pitch for matters of national consequence, when all of us knuckleheads spend like hours deliberating what color the graph should be on our monthly MRR report. And so I just decided, all right, I'm gonna try 5-minute meetings. And so now, when I was running Yext, I used to travel to London, and I'd set up 5-minute back-to-back-to-back meetings with my whole team. And we had 100 people, let's say. It would take 500 minutes. It would take more than a day to get through everyone, but I emerged from these 5-minute meetings with so much information about what was going on in the company. And by the way, so much can get done in 5 minutes, you'd be shocked. The Super Bowl ad is 30 seconds. Television ads are 30 seconds. This is like 10 Super Bowl ads. People come in, they're concise, they get to the point, you have a timer, and guess what? You'll be shocked when you're done in 4 minutes. Your time, if you box the time like this, Elon once said that if you give yourself 3 days to clean your room, it'll take 3 days. If you give yourself 30 minutes, you'll get done in 30 minutes. And he also managed to catch a rocket ship yesterday, 2 days ago, without legs. So he knows what he's talking about when it comes to stuff. He's pretty smart. This is a really tactical one for founders that are building their companies now. I happen to grow up next to a guy. The guy on the left is named Dan Daniello. He's the founder of the Carlyle Group. The guy on the right is James Baker, who's the former Secretary of State for the United States of America. And when Dan was building the Carlyle Group, this is totally random. Before he founded the company, he grew up like 4 houses down from me in Virginia. And let me say, like, this was a nothing town. Like, we grew up on the wrong side of the tracks. I grew up with nothing. Dan grew up with nothing. And he's 30 years older than me, but he was starting Carlyle Group, and I watched him do this. And Dan always mentored me throughout college and more. And one time when I was in college and Carlyle was starting to get some legs behind it, I noticed that they named James Baker as chairman of the Carlyle Group. And this didn't make any sense to me because this guy was a government official, but Carlyle was a private equity buyout company. So I called Mr. Daniello, because I still call him Mr. Daniello to this day. I said, Mr. Daniello, Mr. D, why did you name James Baker to be chairman? He's in government. And Mr. D said, because he's a phone call away from anyone in the world. Think about how we can get access to any state, any company from a phone call from Jim Baker. And I thought about that, and it stayed with me. And here's the tactical advice for founders. I personally believe that if you have a ton of BDRs and SDRs, I think the entire model is completely inverted. When I was running Yext, I used to get calls from BDRs and SDRs all day long. I mean, we all do. It was not very effective. And so a better strategy is to invert the model and to flip it around. and to instead concentrate your limit. As founders, we have no resources. Everything is so limited. What you do is you concentrate your resources in hiring some advisors. And an advisor is someone that can be, it doesn't have to be Jim Baker, it can be someone that's a phone call away from people that you want to reach. Now, remember a minute ago I said I was with David Cummings in Atlanta. David is a phone call away from any founder in Atlanta. And so we made him an advisor and investor when we started Roam. And David, when we held our dinner in Atlanta, was able to bring 50 founders together with one phone call to each of them. It was a trivial matter. I did this at Yext. When I started Yext, we were selling to gyms. And I went out and I sold, and I got the past president of, and I was 25. And I called up the past president of IHRSA, the International Health and Racquetball Association. His name was Rick Caro. He was like 89. It didn't look like he was the head of a gym thing. Anyway, he joined us as an advisor, and he, with one phone call, connected us to the CEOs of Equinox and Crunch and 24 Hour Fitness, all the big fitness chains, and we had thousands of gyms signed up. So I tactically recommend founders taking a certain percentage of your options pool. Maybe it's like 1 or 2%, and dividing that up into like 10 or 20, and giving away, call it 1/10 of a point to 10 advisors, making the deal with them 1 year. Most advisors lose their value after a year, and be really explicit about the fact that you want introductions to a certain kind of company. And often these folks are willing and able and excited at the opportunity of partnering with a cool tech company. Maybe your tech is great in AI or a certain vertical and is a game changer. And so the ability to go after an industry luminary who may not be in tech, but bring them into the tech fold and give them something exciting to talk about that could be transformational for their industry is appealing. That plus the stock options, I believe, will have more efficacy for your ROI in sales and marketing than a traditional BDR or SDR stack. That's what I learned from Mr. Daniello, who I still call Mr. Daniello. Here's another really specific one for founders. Did you have a question? I don't know if there's a mic here, but if you just yell it, I can hear it. Oh, we got a mic.
Yeah. So I really like your point around the advisor-led growth. What criteria would you go into finding the right advisor for you, or mentor, whoever the case may be?
So it depends on your business, but typically these people are like past presidents of a trade association. You want to almost grab them from not tech. That's what makes them super effective. Often they've been in government, or often they've been in nonprofits, but they're super connected in their industry. And frankly, I can say this, often they are quite old and have lots of connections everywhere.
So old guys.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool. Here's another really tactical one, and this is a trick that your VCs will love if you play this perfectly right. So in 2014, Intuit made an offer to buy Yext. This has never been publicly disclosed. It's ancient history now, so I'm happy to talk about it. And we ended up turning the offer down, and I'm glad we did, because we had a $3 billion IPO. But one of the things they did throughout the process was they had Bill Campbell come to me. Bill Campbell was the subject of Eric's book about Trillion Dollar Coach. Bill was on the board of Apple, and he was the chairman of Intuit, and he was, emailing me like, let's go, we got this, like, and all these sort of motivational things. I was like, what the fuck is going on? Like, why is this guy emailing me? And so it just turned out that it got me kind of thinking about this, and so I saw the power of Intuit having a chairman that was not the founder, and so I did it at Yext and I did it again at Roam. And here is the specific tactic. So of those of you that were founders, how many of you, founders raise your hand, founder CEOs raise your hand. How many of you are also chairman of the board? Okay, I recommend that you give it up. I recommend that you find someone who is better than you, that is better, that you aspire to, that has done, when I say better than you, I mean that has achieved the 10x that you hope to achieve already, and make them the chairman. And often this person is super spectacular. This does a couple of things. This accomplished, first off, the chairman title is purely ceremonial. It's meaningless. It doesn't get anybody anything. It's just, they call the meeting to order, and that is that. It's just a title. It's a board ceremonial secretarial function. That is it. It doesn't actually give any power. But by naming a board chair, by bringing in someone that's the former, executive at PepsiCo, or the former executive at a German insurance company, or the CEO of Tesco, these are people who you can bring into your board that will bring incredible credibility to your company, different than an advisor, by the way, but your VCs will be cool with it. Because VCs are in the game of risk. It's an asymmetrical risk for you as a founder. They want you to hit it huge. They don't want you to fail, but they know that you're likely to fail, and they're okay with that. And so anything that you can do to minimize your risk of failure or maximize your risk of success, like naming a luminary to your board, they're going to be okay with. But later on, it gives you an extra vote. At Yext, I named a chairman in Mike Walrath, who had already built and sold a huge company. And at Roam, even though I'd already taken a company public and run it for 22 quarters and did 8 appearances on Jim Cramer where he trashed me all the time, I will tell you that I named a chairman in Brent Saunders, who had run Allergan Health, which is a $100 billion pharmaceutical company. He'd just done much more than I have, and I wanted to learn from him, so I named Brent chairman. I think if you're the chairman, you should give up the title and bring someone else on that can kind of help you along the way, and do so as early as possible. And if you show up with the CEO of Allergan Health and they want to be on your board, what VC is going to say no to that? They'd be crazy to do it. Okay, this is my, you can see Walt Disney here in the back. Walt inspired Steve in a huge way. And you can see that, Steve ended up on the board of Disney. You can see all the Pixar stuff that ended up as now the dominant form of stuff at Disney. When you are founding your company, you're gonna get advice, you're gonna get you're gonna get lots of advice, much of it bad. And here's some really bad advice. When people tell you to delegate something, that's really bad advice. You should delegate nothing. In fact, when you have to delegate as you scale, this is the order in which you should delegate stuff. First delegate legal, then accounting, then HR. Sorry, I didn't mean to shit on those things. Then delegate finance, then ops, then demand gen, then sales and customer service, then engineering, then storytelling, then recruiting. Delegate recruiting second to last, and then hold on with your dear life to product market fit. Over your dead body as the founder, should you ever delegate product market fit. This is the only job that matters. All that other stuff, it's all noise. The signal is product market fit. And the success of your company will be determined by the strength of product market fit by a signal to noise ratio of probably 1,000 to 1. All the other stuff, you can do playbooks, you can make it happen, but product market fit is the forever job of the founder. And just remember this, Rick Rubin, the best, most famous record producer of all time, there are no rules. People that show up with the playbook, they don't necessarily know what they're doing. Rules are gonna just get you to average behaviors. If you make something great, maybe it'll become a rule later on, but you have to break the rules in order to become not average. And both you and your VCs want you to be not average. I strongly implore you to break all the rules. That's the only way you're ever gonna get to the outsized asymmetrical success that we all want you to get to. And so finally, I'll leave you with this. Founder is the only permanent title. It's your company. You can do whatever the fuck you want. So go do it. Thank you.